Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න. Work and learn. Meet Light Meet Max. සක්‍රිය කර ගැනීමට MySLT app එකට log වෙන්න.
Nava Dove Healthy Ritual. 4 එකක් moisturizing milk, cornflour සහ coconut oil සමගින්.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Saturday the 14th of January 2023. The only way out. The International Monetary Fund is Sri Lanka's only solution right now, says President Ranil Wickremesinghe. Negotiations with Japan completed, but China and India yet to grant approval. Compromise. IMF chief says global lender working with China to extend maturities of its loans to debt-affected countries like Sri Lanka. The right reasons. Economists warns against privatizing state-owned enterprises for ideological reasons.
The main consideration is how is it going to help my competitiveness?
And there is a significant distortion in the level playing field.
We have seen the chaos, havoc and inequality privatizing public sector enterprises created.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. From Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe points out that Sri Lanka's economy will only see some positive growth in 2024. But to get there, he proposes for private businesses, marketing boards and trade unions and farmers, including the public sector, to prepare a framework for a social contract that would advance the current economic program. Commenting on Sri Lanka's debt restructuring efforts, the head of state also said that the IMF is Sri Lanka's only way out of the crisis. He added that the government's negotiations with Japan, one of the three main creditors of Sri Lanka, has already been completed. But China and India are the only countries yet to approve debt assurances. But the president said discussions with China's Exim Bank have already been commenced. President Ranil Wickremesinghe met with members of the trade unions last afternoon at the Presidential Secretariat. Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena also attended the meeting. I know the pain the people of the country are undergoing. There are shortcomings in education and the health sector. These are the effects of the collapse of the economy. The only way forward right now is with the IMF. There is still better medicine that needs to be taken to get better. There is no other option at the moment. All other countries except China and India have given their approval. Japan has also approved. We began discussions with the Chinese Exim Bank and we continue to exchange views. India's foreign minister is scheduled to visit Sri Lanka on the 19th of January to discuss debt restructuring process. We have made allocations to provide rice in the months of March and April to about 2 million families that are not entitled to the Samruddhi benefits. Based on how we are progressing at the moment, the situation will get better after the first quarter. A positive growth will come about only in 2024. I suggest that not only the public sector but also private businesses, marketing boards, trade unions, farmers and all should discuss at length and at least reach a framework of a social contract on how we can advance this economic program. Now, for countries faced with debt crises like Sri Lanka, the International Monetary Fund says the global lender is looking at stretching out maturities, reducing or eliminating interest rates and payments for Chinese loans. Its Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said the IMF will engage with China on paving a pathway for their contribution to debt resolution to Sri Lanka, Chad, Zambia and Suriname. Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, says the global lender is working with China on two fronts to provide debt relief to nations in dire need of such. On one end, the IMF chief said they are engaging on a country level with China to define a pathway for debt resolution for Chad, Zambia, Sri Lanka and Suriname to help China understand both the whole issue of debt sustainability and what can be a pathway for their contribution. The other is through coordination among Chinese agencies that would allow all sources of debt to China to be part of the discussion for a solution. Georgieva went on to say that China does not have the tradition of that coordination that exists in more mature lenders. Nevertheless, she added that they have seen more willingness from the Chinese side. Georgieva highlighted this by pointing out to a meeting that was set up between two key agencies, the Ministry of Finance and the People's Bank of China, during a visit by the IMF to China. The IMF chief stated that the problem China faces is brought on due to a notion shared by country officials that China is still a developing nation and it genuinely offers support to other developing nations but expects to be paid back because it is a developing country. As such, she said that a haircut in the Chinese context is politically very difficult, but they understood after many interactions that there are ways in which they can reach the equivalence of a haircut by stretching maturities, reducing or eliminating interest rates, payments and the Paris Club in their own engagement with China. This, the IMF chief said, was the approach so that there might be a way to reach the same objective in terms of reducing the burden of debt. Commenting further, Georgieva went on to say that the IMF continues to discuss with China the value for the country as a lender to have the exposure to countries that can actually service that debt. Now, a high-level delegation of the Communist Party of China, led by the vice chairman of its international department, Shen Zhao, arrived in Sri Lanka today. Vice Minister Shen Zhao called on President Ranil Wickremesinghe this evening and conveyed a letter from the General Secretary of the CPC, Central Committee and President of China, Xi Jinping. They had a friendly and fruitful dialogue on how to enhance the China-Sri Lanka bilateral pragmatic cooperation and party-to-party exchanges. During that, President Wickremesinghe had stated that Sri Lanka looks forward to China's support in restructuring the island's debt at the moment and the economy in the near future. The CPC delegates will be in the country from the 14th of January until the 18th of this month. This is the Chinese Communist Party's first official visit to Sri Lanka for the year 2023. It is also the party's first visit after the 20th CPC National Congress. Now, development economist Professor Jayati Ghosh and economist Dr. Howard Nicholas are of the opinion that Sri Lanka's push for privatization, done for ideological reasons, would promote greater poverty and the exclusion and improve greater poverty in the country unless it improves competitiveness in the market and promotes efficiency. Adding on to these comments, financial analyst Murtaza Jafaji told Indiva Riyamatta at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24 that given the political system of the country does not promote governance, cooperation and corruption could be expected through a move that lacks regulatory framework to ensure otherwise.
The recent budget also looked at a lot of structural changes, talking about cash transfers to the poor and also restructuring state-owned enterprises. How do you analyze Sri Lanka's policies going forward?
Whenever you look at privatization as a country, your main consideration is how is it going to help my competitiveness? You don't privatize if it is not going to improve your competitiveness. You don't privatize if it's going to raise energy costs. You don't privatize if it's going to raise water costs. You don't privatize if it's going to raise transport costs. Now, many countries have actually done this privatization for ideological reasons and suffered the consequences. UK is one of those. They privatized railway, it's a disaster. They privatized airports and handed it over to one company, UK Airports Authority, and now everybody agrees it's been a disaster. The Daily Telegraph, which actually was promoting, came out and said that after the privatization, the business traveler spent 40 minutes extra for each time they traveled, which has a huge cost for the society. So it shouldn't be done on ideological basis, but rather it should be done on commercial basis. Is this helping us? Can we get better management? Can we get better technology, etc.? So I'm not against privatization per se. I'm actually very much in favor of it. But you have to do it for the right things and the right reasons.
Then you come to the question of state-owned enterprise. There is another angle that has to be brought in, the cultural context and practices of your country. Everybody dreams of a Singapore kind of Temasek, but that was a unique for every Lee Kuan Yew, there were 50 Robert Mugabes. And the reality is that the political system in this country, etc., it doesn't encourage good governance. So therefore, the precondition of the state-owned enterprise of good governance is not there, because it is the politicians who decide who is going to govern these entities, and it is not based on a merit basis. Second thing is the issue of what is called competitive neutrality, that some of these SOEs are competing with private companies, and there is a significant distortion in the level playing field because they are benefiting from certain advantages. These SOEs also have upstream and downstream customers. Take the case of the electricity. So we are all consumers of electricity, but because there's mismanagement and mainly underpricing, you have power cuts basically. That does more harm than saying holding down prices. So if you give me the option between higher tariffs and power cuts, I would any day accept higher tariffs because I can self-impose a power cut on myself if I can't afford it. If the utility cuts it on some arbitrary thing, my flexibility is completely impacted.
Privatizing public sector enterprises, often seen as one of these means of greater efficiency, and we have seen the chaos, havoc, and inequality that it has created in so many countries. Essentially, you have to look at what they're doing and what impact they have on the rest of the economy. And one of the critical problems with privatization, very broadly speaking, if it is such a corrupt state that all the public sector enterprises are also in effect corrupted by them, then selling all of them to private enterprises just gives you corrupt crony capitalism. If everything is so bad in terms of the state and the lack of accountability. So it doesn't solve the problem by handing it over. What it does do is generate massive exclusion. Who are the people in the country who will not be able to afford power? And is that what you want to do to the country? Is to tell the poor that they don't get electricity? So I think there's a real problem in terms of which sectors you privatize, how you privatize them, and what you think you will gain out of them. You do it in terms of what you will gain in the economy, in terms of competitiveness, but also bearing in mind the needs of the macroeconomy and of inclusion and avoiding greater poverty among the people.
Stay with us for more news after this short commercial break.
It's hard to keep up with the new when you're listening to the same old Slim Bread Week. A week for professionals.
Welcome back. In a world that Sri Lanka maintains a non-aligned foreign policy, Defence Secretary, retired General Kamal Gunaratne says that the geopolitical environment in the Indian Ocean region will affect Sri Lanka's national security. He pointed out to the importance of Sri Lanka staying updated and in line with developments of geopolitics of the world and the Indian region. The launch of the book Story of the World, Geopolitical Alliances and Rivalries Set in Stone, authored by Media Director of the Ministry of Defence, Colonel Nalin Herath, was held recently in Colombo under the patronage of State Minister of Defence, Pramita Bandaranathengakul, and Defence Secretary General Kamal Gunaratne.
The Indian Ocean region has become an economic and political center of gravity, Indo-Pacific paradigm. The geopolitics of the region has increased the importance of its small island states such as Sri Lanka. Powers such as United States, China and many others are increasingly trying to make a significant presence in this region. India is a basic element of the entire Indo-Pacific discourse and Indian Ocean region. Therefore, it has the greatest stakes in the region. US presence in the Indian Ocean through Quad is consequently at large, while the strategy of China makes it economic engagements as a major power projection, given its growing role in the Indian Ocean region. At such a backdrop, as the nuclear weapons capability of a country being a significant factor in power projection, we must not forget that in the regional perspectives, three neighboring countries who possess nuclear capability in Asia are sharing their borders, makes this region more volatile in terms of power projection. In the context of a national security perspective of a nation, threats that were part of a historical setting, which were a function of the geopolitical environment of a country, are now also influenced by the changing dynamics in the contemporary security environment. Today, the world we live in is not the same world, and threats are not the same threats that shaped national security in the past. As a result, and most importantly, sovereignty of a state, which earlier mentioned national security, does not have the same meaning. Therefore, the deliberation and study on geopolitics are identified as of a paramount importance by scholars all around the world as a nation's destiny will be someday decided on bedrock of such alliances and rivalries, the geopolitical arena. Circumstances are as such. Sri Lanka pursues a non-aligned policy and maintains a friendship with all countries and adopts a balanced foreign policy for healthy international relations, all regional and global entities. However, as explained earlier, geopolitical context and its inherent constraints will have a decisive bearing on Sri Lanka's national security and internal and external threats faced by the country.
The military must continue to build an officer corps capable of meeting the demands of the modern environment. I always believe today's officer must be ready to work closely alongside governmental agencies, foreign militaries, governments, and non-governmental organizations. This requires a refined understanding of international affairs and inter-organizational coordination, and a commitment to seek innovative solutions to solve complex national and international problems. While today's military is well equipped with officers such knowledge, skills, and attitude, it seems we are not yet ready to benefit from its best talent, as we have not devised a system in the military to make the best of their academic wealth. Across the globe, militaries have made great innovations, contributed to literature in various fields. Their commitment, expertise, and experience have been utilized in various fields like management and automobile industry. So in Sri Lanka, we are at a juncture where we have to think whether we have been able to utilize the knowledge and experience of the armed forces productively.
Now, a group of 46 Sri Lankans were repatriated by French authorities last evening after a foiled attempt to illegally migrate to the France's Reunion Island. Sri Lanka's Navy reported that authorities had repatriated the 46 Sri Lankan nationals last evening. The group of 43 men, 3 women and a young boy had set aboard a multi-day fishing trawler from Negombo on the 2nd of December and were apprehended on the 24th of December attempting to illegally enter France's Reunion Island. Identified as residents of Japan, Kilinochi, Mullaitivu, Mana, Bariklo and Chilau and Negombo, the Sri Lankan Navy reported that the group is due to be handed over to the CID for further action. The smugglers who facilitated the illegal migration attempt have been identified as residents of the Hivala. The Navy says fees ranging from 200,000 to 4.5 million had been obtained from each individual. Now, Labour and Foreign Employment Minister Manusha Nanayakkara has discussed Sri Lanka's efforts to end human trafficking with the US Ambassador in Colombo. The meeting yesterday had focused on ongoing efforts by Sri Lankan authorities. Taking to official Twitter handle, the US envoy said that recent issue of women trafficked to Oman was also focused on during the discussion. Ongoing labour reform efforts that promote migrants' rights and enhancing Sri Lanka's overall competitiveness in the global stage was also taken up for discussion. The Sri Lankan worker remittances increased 46% in December last year to $475.6 million compared to the $325.5 million in the same month of the year 2021. However, overall inflows of worker remittances fell 31% during 2022 to $3,786.5 million from the previous year's $5,491.5 million. Although Sri Lanka recorded a marked increase in the number of people seeking overseas employment as migrant workers last year to 311,269, workers' remittances are yet to rise. Now, at least 4 Chinese-owned supertankers are shipping Russian Urals oil to China, according to Reuters, based on trading sources and tracking data as Moscow seeks vessels for exports after a G7 oil price cap restricted the use of Western cargo services and insurance. At least 4 Chinese-owned supertankers are shipping Russia's Urals crude to China, according to Reuters, based on trading sources and tracking data, as Moscow seeks vessels for exports after G7 oil price cap restricted the use of Western cargo services and insurance. China, the world's top oil importer, has continued buying Russian oil despite Western sanctions, after Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping launched what they called a no-limit partnership before the war in Ukraine. Reuters reported that sources said a 5th supertanker or very large crude carrier was shipping crude to India, which, like China, was continued buying Russian oil sold at a discount as many Western buyers turned to other suppliers. Industry sources say Indian refiners are securing a discount of $15 to $20 per barrel on Russian oil. Indian Oil Minister Hardeep Singh Puri said at a press briefing on Thursday that India would buy oil from wherever it could secure the cheapest price. The G7 price cap introduced in December allows countries outside European Union to import seaborne Russian oil, but it prohibits shipping, insurance and reinsurance companies from handling Russian crude cargoes unless sold for below the $60 cap. Now, energy ministers of Qatar and the United Arab Emirates say the world will need natural gas for a long time and more investment is required to ensure supply security and affordable prices during the global energy transition. Saad Al-Kaabi, Qatari State Minister for Energy, told the Atlantic Council Global Energy Summit that a mild winter in Europe had seen prices come down, but that volatility would remain for some time to come, given that there was not much gas coming into the market until 2025. He said the issue is what's going to happen with Europe want to replenish their storages this coming year and the next year. Qatar is one of the world's top producers of liquefied natural gas. The UAE is the OPEC oil producer that is shifting its focus to gas market as Europe seeks to replace Russian energy imports. The Qatari minister said he believed that Russian gas would eventually return to Europe. UAE Energy Minister Suhail Al-Muzairi, speaking on the same panel in Abu Dhabi, agreed that for a long time gas will be there and that while more renewable energy would be installed, more investment was needed in a gas on a base load. The former MP Sri Ranga Jayaratnam has been elected as the president of the Sri Lankan Football Federation after obtaining 27 votes. Meanwhile, his rival contestant Jagat Rohana de Silva was behind by 3 votes, with a total of 24 votes in his favour. The election was held at the Sports Ministry Auditorium in Colombo today. Nominations for the election closed on the 20th of January 2022, with 40 candidates having applied for a total of 10 positions. The new office bearers will be in office for a period of 5 months, and another election of the Federation's office bearers is scheduled to be held once again on the 31st of May this year. The former president of the Federation, Jaswa Umar, who was elected to the position in June 2021, was removed from the post following a complaint against him. And that's all the news we have for this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.